All right. For the sake of time, we'll just move to the Q&A section. All right. So, Lady E, are you there?
Yes, please. I'm here.
All right. Good, good. I've not forgotten your presentation. That was really powerful. Eh? That was absolutely powerful. Right. The first question I want to ask you is you talked of what you learn along the way writing. Of course, I know that there are usually a lot of things people learn writing, you know. Of course, you are a journalist, you are really very formed in this area. But I'm interested in your personal lesson. What is your takeaway from your book? I'm talking of the lesson that you learn writing your book.
All right. The book is Distortion. It can be found. We're actually doing a special series on it with regards to its promotion and all of that. So people actually just directly reach out to us on our LinkedIn pages on Literary Media, and of course on my LinkedIn page on Lady Ejiro Umukoro for connection. But here's the thing with Distortion that that is powerful. I realized that a book can tell its own story. Just allow your characters breathe. When you take a topic, for example, my writing or working title at the time was Out of Favor.
Thank you for watching. Are you enjoying the video? Let us know in the comment section. My mission is to help professionals like you to own their story. What would I do for you, you might ask? Well, it helps you make your competition irrelevant. Want to learn more? Check out our signature program, Own Your Story, a 5-week training to reshape your narrative. The link is what you see on your screen, academy.aclasses.org/story. Now back to the conversation.
But when I started writing, because you need a working title, at first I didn't even have a working title. The thought occurred to me the thing was so powerful. I just said, this thing that is ruminating in my head, I need to pen this down. And I just started with the first scene without knowing I was writing the book itself. So I penned that down, and I noticed that for the next 3 hours, I kept writing nonstop. I was supposed to just write a sentence, and I just kept writing nonstop for 3 hours. It was just pouring. As it poured, I saw something was developing. So I quickly wanted to save it properly. And then the title Out of Favor popped. And then I saved it as that. But then as I continued writing, I noticed that the characters were coming up on their own. They were developing themselves. They were giving me their mannerisms, their skin color, their hairdo, eye color, teeth, shape, structure of how they walk, their posture, everything. They were just coming on their own. And for me, that was so powerful because I didn't sit down to ever say, okay, Abu, for example, will be like, Mama G will be like, Kojo, the young teenager, will be like, Mena will be like. No, it didn't happen like that. Like some people are very detailed in their writing. My book, Distortion, was a highly organic book. And I think it came from a place of depth of despair, fear, and an urge, like this powerful urge to like, no, something has to be done. And that was what influenced even my investigative stories that I was writing, because I wanted to solve a problem, a social problem, a vices in our system that was now a monster. And I just wanted to find what's the solution to this problem, for goodness sake. And I wanted a one-page or one-stop fit-all kind of approach to the solution. And so my investigative work went along the lines of telling the story of people who were affected, the perpetrators, and then before you know it, I wanted solutions. And so I started looking for solutions from the legal system, the framework, the various government parastatals, the various ministries, NGOs, CSOs, and then the gaps within and the shortages that we had. And it on its own, before I knew what was happening, I wrote an entire 7,000 word news item. So it became a long form journalistic work. And then I started using statistic, data visualization, and all of this to tell that story. So in doing that, what now happened when I wanted to now write distortion, it now influenced the nature of who I am going to write about, because I now have depth. So I didn't experience writer's block or any of those things that people say they experience, because I had a rich database, a knowledge base to draw from. I had interacted with people who were affected, the perpetrators of the crimes. I have interacted with their mind, I sat with them at police station. I went as far as digging and finding out where these ladies were buried in some cases, because there were some heinous crimes that were committed. And so that's why my book became a mental health crime book. There is none like that in Nigeria. There is no mental health crime book in Nigeria. Mine is the first. And I'm the first investigative journalist to ever write an investigative-driven book that was also adopted and endorsed by the Ministry of Education as a literature for schools. So all of this, I didn't see happening, but that's what distortion has just told me, that when you want to let a story write itself, the characters will not be cardboard-like. The characters will be full. They will be total. The characters will be flawed. The characters will excite you. They will offend you. They will make you irreverent. The characters will challenge even your own premises, your own belief system. It will make you question the data you even have. It will make you ask why you believe what you believe. Are you also not biased and prejudiced? So that it affected how I was using language, how I was creating dialogue, how I was trying to be as authentic in the representation of this person, so that when people see them, they say, oh my God, this person is like me. I know of many persons who have written back to me to say, you were in my head. Or some will say, this person, this character, like for example, Abu, somebody said, Abu is exactly who I am. And in reading him, I just realized, God, if I also had taken another kind of decision, I could have become somebody like this. And that was why I decided to write it. Because I discovered that in Nigeria, mental health is not something we talk about. In America and Europe and elsewhere, mental health is seen as something that people think is just the new buzzword. You just throw it around. No, it's not something you just throw around. It's not a buzzword. Mental health is about understanding the significance of how, as you eat your diet, your food is as significant to the quality of your skin, your brain cells, right? Your organs functioning, and takes you away from repeated visitation to the hospital. So it is that your mental health requires a conscious, intentional, deliberate approach to protecting it. And how is it really manipulated? It's the language. It's that noise you have in your head, your stream of subconsciousness or stream of consciousness, as people might put it. The way you talk to yourself, your self-talk, the things you read, the videos you watch, the social media pages you consume from morning till night, the WhatsApp messages that pour into your spaces, your network, your connections, all of these things, if you are not selective in what you absorb, because the brain is a sponge, if you don't manage it, you are going to be affected. So mental health, and in this context, mental health crime is showing that when we don't take care of our mental health, when push comes to shove, and the pressure becomes so unsurmountable sometimes based on our perception or our reception of what we're experiencing, we can collapse, we can give in, we can break, and we can crack. And when that happens, when we're in that space where we have cracked, who do we become? What do we do? How do we do them? When will we do what which we do that reflects who we are at that point in time? And why are we even doing it? I love the last speaker when she said, do not use your trauma to affect other people in your storytelling. And that's why mental health is critical. Because every one of us who writes as a writer, I tried as much as I can not to represent any part of me, even in the book, because often the times you can see a writer in the book. It doesn't mean parts of you will not sieve into the book. Parts of you will sieve into the book. But in doing that, you also want to be very conscious. And that's one of the things I learned when I started writing Distortion. I realized that, oh my gosh, if I'm going to write Distortion and I'm writing it, I am querying myself in the process. Am I in these stories? Do I see myself in these stories? Is anything a reflection of my identity here? Who resonates more with me, or who do I resonate more with, and why? What does it reveal about me? There was a scene in Distortion that I wrote, and I broke down. It was a scene with regards to Mena, a young teenage girl who tried to leave her home, where she was, she was an orphan. She lost a mom and dad, and so she had to be more or less shopped off to the nearest relative that would be willing to house her. And then she was turned automatically to the domestic servant, not even aid, a domestic servant in the home, where she take care of her nephews, her cousins, their needs and their welfare. She was denied her rights to go to school. When in telling Mena's story, it was after I had written the scene of what Abu did to Mena. That was when I realized that it was the collection of the entire gender-based violence I had written about women, about young children, especially at the height of COVID-19, and how they could not escape the home in which they were in. And in the manner my brain was able to process that was to put it in the shape of Mena, and then show Abu in a manner that I never thought I would create Abu to be, but it became manifested like that. Abu now became the COVID-19. That's why he came to represent the lockdown. Abu became the lockdown. And every other person who experienced Abu felt the lockdown of Abu in many facets. And for me, that was so powerful because it revealed to me how my brain processed things and how it can create characters and bring to life real significant issues in a manner that resonates to people. I've seen or known people who reach out to me and said, Mena was too much for them to take in the sense that it was true, it was real, and many of them just felt we have to do something for our Nigerian children. We've got to protect our children. So for me, while they went through the strain and pressure and stress that these characters went through, I saw how people come out of it on the other side to say, oh my gosh, we need to do something. And that is why I'm very pleased and I'm very happy and grateful that somehow Distortion was, endorsed by the Ministry of Education to be the literature for schools. And we're going to just see how much more we're going to do, more than what we're currently doing, to really make it a more impactful book, much more than what it is currently. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much for that. Anyway, remain there. I have another question for you. We're happy that we have you here, of course, to let the people know what you're doing and what you have done. The second question have to do with what you were saying during the presentation, which is about inclusion. Yeah, that topic is important for us, whether you are looking at Nigeria as a country where both of us are coming from, or within the diaspora community, which is also very important for us. Because we live in the diaspora among people that are not like us. So the question of inclusion becomes important for us, whether in terms of how we live and how we live in relation to the people that we are cohabiting, how our narrative should reflect other people like us who might not necessarily be within the same geography with us, but who have the same identity like us, in this case, the African diaspora. because at the end of the day, we are not all necessarily of the same gender. We do not all believe or have the same faith. We do not all have the same language or speak the same language, as it were, but we are all the diaspora people. So if we are going to tell story, the story is not going to exclude any of us. It's going to include us. That is how we are going to be able to advance in this area. A good example is the work of Marcus Garvey. If Marcus Garvey's story, you know, the guy was able to put millions of people together. If he were just looking at only for the people that are coming from the small island of Jamaica, he was going to isolate himself. And we will see now that Marcus Garvey didn't only work within even the African diaspora. Many of the people that he was dealing with in England and also in the United States, but mostly in England, they were actually white people. So that talk of a man that is able to live beyond the boundary and able to reach out to every resources that he can reach to maximize the message that he has brought this world to. Are you an entrepreneur struggling to stand out in a crowded market? Your secret weapon is your story. Discover how to make your competition irrelevant by owning your story. Want to learn more? Check out our signature program, Own Your Story, a 5-week training to reshape your narrative. The link is what you see on your screen, academy.aclasses.org/story. Now back to the conversation. Inclusion. How do you think we should be able to do that? What are the strategies you think writer should employ so that their story should not exclude people, it should include people? For example, if you look at the NYC, I think, I don't remember which year it was initiated. It was one of those agenda to bring the people together because we're actually a diverse people. But our diversity naturally is not supposed to even be a problem. It's supposed to be richness. But somehow, some people still use it as a way to bring down the country. But as writer, as people who are in the art, how can we use this? How can we use diversity to build up the Nigerian nation and also within the diaspora, if you were to take it also that length? Please help us.
That's a very powerful question. The NYSC began after the Civil War happened in Nigeria, and Obasanjo, and Gowon rather, they were the ones to be credited for trying to make that happen when in the 70s, I think 1975, or was it 78 or so, just before the 1980s, Gilbert. I need to get that correctly, but it's within that time frame. And the reason was so that we could bring together Nigerians. And it was just so fundamental because, one, we were just coming out of a civil war that lasted for 3 years with over 3 million people that died. And the theme of the civil war was a case of northern Nigeria against southern Nigeria, but a specific group in the southern part of Nigeria. And so therefore, then the West was on this other side of Nigeria, and that division happened. And then the need to, talk about that story was significant. But if you look at many stories that many people wrote in that era, where they wanted to, talk about the Civil War, I don't want to mention a particular author in Nigeria here who happened to have some acclaim. When I read that book, as much as the book was powerful, I noticed that the book was too narrow-minded, in the sense that the book just focused on that tribe alone. And when they mention other tribe, like maybe people from the Edoid extension, which means Delta, Edo, Yoruba, by extension, go further, I noticed that they only mentioned them either one sentence or two, and they were depicted as drivers or housemates. And I found that very cardboard-like. Then I also realized that, okay, somebody's bias and prejudice is at play here. There was no doubt about it. And that's why when we talk about inclusion, it means you want to check your bias meter, your prejudice meter. We all have one. But being aware when our bias is playing out is very key. So when we want to tell stories, like somebody told me, and not even one person, several people have told me that, they told me that whenever they read Distortion, they noticed that I included virtually every representative tribe as much as possible. In other words, I covered the entire Nigeria. from the north, the south, the east, and the west. You will see a representation. In a way, I think it was playing on who I am, because I have never understood the idea of the non-Nigerianness or the non-globalness of who we are, such that even if you are an African in the diaspora or a Nigerian in a tribe that belongs to a tribe in Nigeria, you are in a community. You live, you go to school, you go to work, you go to buy groceries, you go to do businesses with people, right? You drive along the road and you take a stroll, you meet people. So your life cannot just be so one way. You go home, enter your car, you go to work, and that's it. It's very dystopic in a manner of speaking when you think about 1984, if that's what you're depicting. So we must be conscious of our biases. That's one. Two, you need to ask yourself, what is your agenda? If your agenda is strictly to tell on your ethnic story, there is room for that in writing. That means that is your goal. So you are now going to create what is called echo chamber. An echo chamber is telling a story to people you feel who are sympathetic to how you have described something or believe it in a certain way and choose to remain in that spot and will not entertain other external ideas. Does it mean that what you have written is true or false? Not necessarily, unless we look at them subjectively and contextually and actually vis-a-vis, contrast them in the larger, bigger, generalized society and say, is this representative, truly speaking? Or are you speaking of a distorted view of life? So if that's your game, fine, go with it. But the truth is, if you begin to do that, you will now be guilty of a single storytelling where you only now create more stereotypes. Because there are no stereotypes except the ones we created. Humans, as billions we are in numbers in the world, no one person is exactly the same person. We may have similarities, but they're never exact. No two persons are exactly alike. Even twins are not. So you look at that consciousness about your agenda. Two, I think some of us have even spoken about it among the speakers. We talk about what are your influences? What is really driving you? If you are speaking from a place of trauma, right, you're going to look for people who are traumatized and tell their own trauma stories as well. So if you are not careful, you may end up telling a story of, so I know of an author who wrote such a traumatic story. It was only very in one place as well, just them and back to, I go to work, I come back, I fetch water, that's it. But it was so trauma laden. I asked myself, to what end was this book about? Why is so much trauma written in the way it's written, though it could be done differently? But that's also another conversation. So you are also going to attract people who are going to read that kind of book. But if we say we want to be a part of a legacy, if we say we want to bring about change, we want to create solutions, we want to bridge gaps, then it means that we will begin to understand that the more we dissociate and create more detachment between people so that they don't see each other, the more we're going to create the racial divide. In the first place, there's no race. We're just all humans with different colors. That's all we are, based in different parts of the world. That's just what it is. So if we know that, and then we begin to retell racism, because I say don't give amplification to racism. I'm done with that. And even colonialism, how are we even telling colonialism? I'm done with that. I am not calling them colonials. I don't refer to them as colonials because it's not necessary. They did not colonize me. I am an identity of my own self. I created who I am. I am aware of who I am. And I believe that if we tell stories, that is why I did the distortion in a manner of speaking. It's about a mental health journey. Who is you? Who are you? What are you trying to tell us? What is your identity? You create it, you reframe it. You can conjure it. And you can revamp it or evolve it, as the case may be. So if we're going to go that route, we need to watch our languages. Oh, they came and colonized. Who told you they came and colonized? They didn't come to colonize. They came, they raped, they plundered, they murdered. You use the right language. By saying that they colonized you, you are still under their control. It's a mentality thing. So you've got to be aware of that. So my language these days for a long time now is I don't use that word. I have banished it from my lexicon. because it belongs to them as a tool of control, a tool of manipulation, a tool of ownership, and a tool to make sure that you are buried and oppressed forever. So why are we telling them and giving them more power? We disempower ourselves when we use their own terminologies. So in our storytelling, when it comes to inclusion, we want to show that we have risen beyond that. We want to project into the future. Afrofuturistic storytelling is the goal here. So if we are now in present Nigeria, for example, you want to include all the people, the foreigners who are even within your midst that you come across, create a character out of them. It may be short, it may be small, but make it powerful in your book. Re-represent them. If they're not putting themselves in the proper way you want them to be in your country, re-represent them in your book, because there are examples of those like them who are doing differently than the way they have presented themselves, especially if it's in a negative light. So these are very key things we need to be aware of. Also, we want to be conscious of how we also, define ourselves and put limits to our imagination and our capacity to evolve. We are an evolving species. Let's not create limitations that constantly makes us lower our own self-worth. So in order to create inclusion means you accept the fact that people have their self-worth. They are regarded, they are treated with dignity. Does it mean you will not tell a story of where abuse has happened? No, you will tell it. But the question is, are you re-trauma and creating over trauma? You can tell the story without over-creating the trauma. Because the truth is, we are living in a traumatized society, and enough of that. We're not saying, because some people will say and argue, oh, come on, if you don't say people's most nasty challenges they had to overcome, then they don't have a story, they don't have a life. Not necessarily. So we can change our romantic stories. We don't have enough romantic stories in Nigeria to tell. There's so many of that, nuanced, that we can talk about. Sub-themes, levels here and there, on layers that they are. We can talk about these ones. There are so many aspects of storytelling we can also talk about inclusion. There are genres that we can think of, that we can incorporate. Even if they're not there in the European genre of categories, we can create our own categories. Who says we must stick to the categories that are already existing or the archetypes that are currently on ground? We can recreate archetypes, we can create new archetypes, and we can just decide to break the limitations of the archetypes and say, you know what? This is the story I want to tell. This is how I want to tell it. We can create new approaches to storytelling as well.
That is too powerful. That is too powerful. There are actually a lot of things there that I could have explored, but I'm not going to go further. But I just want to point out a few things there. If this were an episode, a solo episode, I could ask you a lot of questions. Perhaps it's going to come up when I do the episode with you on your book, because of course we are prepared for that. But I cannot avoid to point this out. I like your boldness, sister. I like it. And I think we need it. And sometimes I do sort of make reference to Nollywood, that Nollywood sort of have changed not just the African narrative, but the global narrative of Black people. And this is what I mean, that we are not afraid. This is what I'm beginning to really study of the Nigerian mentality, that we are not afraid, not even afraid to go wrong, but we want to be able to do it our own way. I've seen a lot of Europeans sort of come to even begin to understand that too. Whether it is because of our numeric advantage or for any other reason, but that is technically a mentality of the Nigeria that helped them to advance. That is, by the way. Now, there is another thing that I also like that you said, which I am sort of ruminating about, which is the language. When you were saying that, why can't we recreate it if we have to? Of course, why can't we if we have to? You know, it is said in storytelling, for example, if you go online to just plot it on Google, you will be told, if you're looking at the term character, for example, because when I was writing the 5-part book series, I was trying to sort of find out, but since when I will be using the term character, it is date back to the Greek. Because anytime the European want to talk about story, they always make sure that the latest they can go is about them, whether it is history, astronomy, physics, talking of medicine, for example. African is always cut out. And sometimes we feel we need to regurgitate that same narrative because it is said by them, then it have to be the truth. But it is not true. Because what I'm finding out, of course, I deliberately went ahead to research that character is not really coming out, the character is not really coming out from ancient Greek. It's coming out from ancient Egypt. It will take a bit of time because this book are 5, because it takes time to explain them. Like I said before, I am not in for the 5 minutes. I am in for the depth. Let's go deep. So I wouldn't go deeper there for the sake of time. But that is something that actually I was thinking, is that why do we often call the European the colonial masters? Have we really reflect on that? Because by calling them the colonial masters, mean that they are masters. So actually,
that's what I'm saying, that we should stop saying that. We should stop referring to it, because the truth is they have totally banished African story and history, even in their storytelling, right? Even in the history of storytelling, in the documentation of research work, except a few others who have decided that no. Africans have a story. They've influenced us in many ways. We've seen where patents done by Africans are deliberately removed simply because somebody doesn't want us to be the bearer of an idea that is so powerful. So I think the onus is on us, really. I don't know if people are hearing me. I hope you are. I think the onus is on us, really, at the end of the day, to decide to say some words should be banished from our writing. We should stop referencing the old that does no value to us. There are a litany of enough data, enough books, enough historical references, right? And sources that we can talk about all of these things. We want to begin to start to tell a story that we want to influence the next 20, 50 years to come. We don't want them to keep digging all this other misinformation that has been there all along, because we are in the age where misinformation and the AI are going to come together now in a manner that we've never seen before, and it's going to be amplified. So that's why we must be conscious now going forward. Now that AI is everywhere, right? Now is the time for Africans to tap into the story writing spaces to begin to tell powerful stories that are reflective of us as more significant, impactful contributors, producers, people who own their own narrative, who are in control of their own future. That's the kind of story we want to start telling, so that when AI is beginning to walk through the algorithms, they will look at us. Our own languages are not even put as translated app. We have to consciously create those translated apps ourselves, or translated AI algorithms or large languages, so that we can impute it within the digital spaces where all of this intelligence go out and get the data that they need to be able to give to the public when they ask AI, can you tell me this? You know, that's where we should be going to. So we should be more deliberate about how we're telling our stories now going forward.
Absolutely, we are coming to that. In fact, maybe the other webinar we are organizing is going to be around that area, because it is important. It's deliberate. Thank you so much for that sharing.